Chapter 31. On a cold night, she has her first hot meal since transmigrating. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wanchocho tossed 5 desiccated meat strips that didn't look appetizing at all into the pot. When the water had come to a boil, she poured some tuber powder into the pot too. She had wanted to add salt, but there wasn't easily usable salt, only salt in large chunks. Wanchocho was too tired, so they could only do without. During the time Wanchocho waited for their very shabby dinner to boil, she sipped the warm water. The warm water easily went down her throat and into her stomach. At that moment, she felt alive again. She let out a long sigh. Then, she carried the wooden bowl to the bed. Mr. Food Reserve, drink some water. Wanchocho thought of how this big gray wolf had acted so fierce in front of her earlier and wanted to treat him a bit gruffly. But, when her swollen red hand touched his skin that was even colder than hers, her heart softened. She gently held his chin to feed him the warm water. However, Mr. Food Reserve was a very troublesome gray wolf. Even though he was unconscious, he was still fiercely baring his teeth. Half of the warm water ran down his attractive jawline instead of into his mouth. Wanchocho. Fortunately, she was holding the dirty animal skin that had recently fallen off of Mr. Gray Wolf underneath his neck, and the rest of the bed didn't get wet. The food had finished cooking. Because she was rationing their food, even though it looked like there was a lot of food in the pot, she knew that it was only enough to fill 2 small bowls. Wanchocho first took out the 5 strips of meat. Each strip wasn't bigger than her pinky. She set 3 pieces aside in Mr. Gray Wolf's bowl to cool down and decided that she would shred the 3 strips of meat into smaller pieces for him to eat after she finished eating. It looked like he was able to swallow food. After that, she began to eat her portion of the food. The bowl of goopy food made from the tuber powder didn't look appetizing at all. In fact, it was quite tasteless and even had a weird smell, but Wanchocho ate it as if it was something delicious. Since coming here, she hadn't had a chance to eat something warm until now. In the past 2 days, the wolf demons had been in a rush to bring her here. They would occasionally catch a snow rabbit or other small animals, roast them, and eat them. However, they wouldn't even toss a bone her way. They wouldn't allow her to use the fire to cook her own food either. Other than drinking the droplets of life-saving water that she condensed with her ability, Wanchocho could only eat the tuber powder raw. Now that she had a warm meal to eat, she felt recovered, as if the warm food was like a medical treatment that cured her illness. Outside the cave, the snow filled the air. Inside the cave, there was the semblance of home from Mr. Gray Wolf and her efforts. Although, this home was quite shabby. After finishing her portion of the food, Wanchocho was only half full. Even so, she was filled with renewed hope. Gaining more patience, she minced the meat in Mr. Gray Wolf's bowl with the bone knife, poured the remaining porridge-like mixture made from the tuber powder into the bowl, and mixed everything together. Mr. Gray Wolf's bowl of food looked kind of gross. Wanchocho quietly washed the spoon she had used for eating, then she carried over the bowl of questionable-looking food over to feed the wolf. Anyways, he couldn't see anything right now. It probably didn't matter, right? Chapter 32. It should be fine to share a bed. Right. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wanchocho had already decided that if Mr. Gray Wolf was still clenching his teeth and wouldn't swallow down the food, she could only hold his chin down and pour the food down his throat. To her surprise, Mr. Gray Wolf was very cooperative this time. Perhaps, he instinctively swallowed the food because his body was so starved. It didn't take long for her to finish feeding him the bowl of questionable-looking food. His teeth gently bumped against the wooden spoon. That clear sound echoed in the cave that was gradually warming up. Wanchocho saw that Mr. Gray Wolf's deathly pale face had regained some color after she had fed him the food. There was a strange feeling in her heart. He was using the wooden spoon that she used earlier. Her gaze inadvertently fell on Mr. Grey Wolf's face. It felt as if there was a beam of warm light that shone on his pale lips in the dimly lit cave. Her fingertips that had touched his lips earlier felt slightly heated. Wanchocho felt that she was being strange and shook those thoughts away. She washed the wooden spoon and bowls before putting them away. The boiling hot water in the wooden basin had already cooled to a comfortable temperature. Wanchocho was going to use this water to give herself and Mr. Grey Wolf a simple cleaning. Her wolf husband's face had been pretty clean to begin with. Based on her interactions with Mr. Grey Wolf today, Wanchocho guessed that he must have been a very honorable Grey Wolf in the past. Although he looked fierce, he also had beautiful silvery gray fur in his demon form. His demon form was so big and impressive. Did he like to stand on top of the cave and howl? In his free time, did he like to raise his paws and wash his furry face? Wanchocho giggled a bit from the images she pictured. Holding the moistened soft animal skin, she moved his hair on the side to wipe away the blood that slowly dripped down from his scar. She quirked her lips. At the same, she felt that his situation was so bleak. If she hadn't agreed to marry him, would this Grey Wolf silently endure pain and hunger in this cold cave until he slowly passed away? The novel had glossed over Mr. Grey Wolf's ending. Up to the part that she had read, it wasn't clear if he had died. Nothing was written about his future. It was because they were the same. They were dispensable supporting characters in the novel. The quietness in the cave was awful. Wanchocho glanced over at Mr. Grey Wolf's handsome face, which looked a bit nefarious because of the scar. A while later, she slowly said, "Mr. Food Reserve, I'm sure with proper care, you'll slowly be able to put on weight." BL.net. She had heard that demon wolf meat was astringent and tough. Besides, she didn't want to eat wolf meat anyways. However, if he gained weight, then the next time that Mr. Grey Wolf became a wolf cub, would he look cuter? It would probably be a very happy feeling to place your hand on a wolf cub's fluffy and chubby belly. Wanchocho thought these were silly thoughts. Mr. Grey Wolf didn't seem to like her at all right now. There may never be a day when she would get to rub his belly. After cleaning Mr. Grey Wolf's face, Wanchocho checked his injuries again. Then, she took some of the long-lasting firewood and placed a small amount into the stone stove. This way, even if she slept all night, the fire wouldn't burn out or spread. Chapter 33. It should be fine to share a bed. Right. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 33. It should be fine to share a bed, right? 2. Wanchocho actually really wanted to take a shower or bath. But right now, that facility wasn't available. Besides, she would feel embarrassed doing so in front of Mr. Grey Wolf even if he was unconscious. And so, after washing her face, Wanchocho simply wiped her body with a moistened animal skin. Of course, this was after she covered up Mr. Grey Wolf's eyes again. The rest of the water was used to wash her feet. It was only when her feet came into contact with the warm water that Wanchocho found out the reason why her feet weren't hurting. It was because they had been frozen to the point of losing sensation. Now that her feet were slightly warmed up, the return of sensation came with stabs of pain and itchiness. She almost couldn't breathe. The soles of her feet were caked with dried blood. Once that washed off, she could see the bluish-purple color of her feet. Her feet resembled two swollen hooves. Wanchocho. She suddenly felt that Mr. Grey Wolf's stump didn't look that ugly. Wanchocho sighed. She really needed a pair of shoes. She put the wooden basin away, wrapped a large animal skin around herself, stepped into the tattered animal skins that served as makeshift shoes, and hobbled her way to the stone bed. Wanchocho carefully got onto the stone bed from the edges and didn't touch Mr. Grey Wolf, who was lying on the outer part of the bed. She was using one of the large animal skin she had brought with her as the sheet for the stone bed. That large animal skin was stitched together from several pieces of animal skin. It was mostly light brown and the length and width were about 2 meters. She didn't know what kind of stone this bed was made from. The stone was big enough that the animal skin couldn't fully cover it. That was fine though, it meant that she and Mr. Grey Wolf had plenty of distance between them while they slept on the same bed. She didn't actually want to share a bed with a husband that she had just met. Moreover, her husband was a demon. However, this cave only had one bed. Even if he had told her to keep 1 meter away from him, he was unconscious right now. It should be fine to share a bed, right? The stone bed was much warmer than the cave walls. Laying on the slightly furry animal skin, it was warm enough. Once Wanchocho found a comfortable spot to lie down, she adjusted the animal skin she had wrapped around herself. Finally, she felt a bit recovered. Although she tried her best, it was impossible to pretend there wasn't a wolf demon lying next to her. Wanchocho slowly turned her head and glimpsed Mr. Grey Wolf's long eyelashes. They looked golden from the light of the fire. His eyelashes cast a motley shadow on his handsome face. His long, black hair was lying on the light brown animal skin underneath them. His slightly round nose and pale lips made his scary face look rather young and fragile. From this perspective, he didn't look like he could have been a cold and ruthless chief that was high above others. On the contrary, he looked like a helpless and young-to-no-better wolf that had lost everything. "Good night, Mr. Grey Wolf," Wanchocho quietly said those words, then silently turned her back to the Grey Wolf that was already her husband in name. Closing her tired eyes, she continued to think about the future. They still had some food left, about 20 caddies of dried meat and 9 caddies of tuber powder. They had enough firewood for half a month. She was using up the animal skins very quickly. The one she had been wearing as clothes had been turned into a curtain to block the wind, and she was using the other large piece as a bed sheet. Of the 10 animal skins that the tribe had given her, one had gotten dirty and another piece had been torn apart to bandage Mr. Grey Wolf's injuries with the scraps set aside as makeshift towels. There were 8 pieces left. Of those 8 pieces, 3 were being used as blankets. Because Mr. Grey Wolf was so tall, he needed 2 pieces to cover up his upper body to his still intact right foot. She couldn't waste the last 5 pieces of animal skins. She planned on using them to make clothes. Chapter 33, It should be fine to share a bed, right? 2. Wanchocho actually really wanted to take a shower or bath. But right now, that facility wasn't available. Besides, she would feel embarrassed doing so in front of Mr. Grey Wolf even if he was unconscious. And so, after washing her face, Wanchocho simply wiped her body with a moistened animal skin. Of course, this was after she covered up Mr. Grey Wolf's eyes again. The rest of the water was used to wash her feet. It was only when her feet came into contact with the warm water that Wanchocho found out the reason why her feet weren't hurting. It was because they had been frozen to the point of losing sensation. Now that her feet were slightly warmed up, the return of sensation came with stabs of pain and itchiness. She almost couldn't breathe. The soles of her feet were caked with dried blood. Once that washed off, she could see the bluish-purple color of her feet. Her feet resembled 2 swollen hooves. Wanchocho. She suddenly felt that Mr. Grey Wolf's stump didn't look that ugly. Wanchocho sighed. She really needed a pair of shoes. She put the wooden basin away, wrapped a large animal skin around herself, stepped into the tattered animal skins that served as makeshift shoes, and hobbled her way to the stone bed. Wanchocho carefully got onto the stone bed from the edges and didn't touch Mr. Grey Wolf, who was lying on the outer part of the bed. She was using one of the large animal skin she had brought with her as the sheet for the stone bed. That large animal skin was stitched together from several pieces of animal skin. It was mostly light brown and the length and width were about 2 meters. She didn't know what kind of stone this bed was made from. The stone was big enough that the animal skin couldn't fully cover it. That was fine though, it meant that she and Mr. Grey Wolf had plenty of distance between them while they slept on the same bed. She didn't actually want to share a bed with a husband that she had just met. Moreover, her husband was a demon. However, this cave only had one bed. Even if he had told her to keep 1 meter away from him, he was unconscious right now. It should be fine to share a bed, right? The stone bed was much warmer than the cave walls. Laying on the slightly furry animal skin, it was warm enough. Once Wanchocho found a comfortable spot to lie down, she adjusted the animal skin she had wrapped around herself. Finally, she felt a bit recovered. Although she tried her best, it was impossible to pretend there wasn't a wolf demon lying next to her. Wanchocho slowly turned her head and glimpsed Mr. Grey Wolf's long eyelashes. They looked golden from the light of the fire. His eyelashes cast a motley shadow on his handsome face. His long, black hair was lying on the light brown animal skin underneath them. His slightly round nose and pale lips made his scary face look rather young and fragile. From this perspective, he didn't look like he could have been a cold and ruthless chief that was high above others. On the contrary, he looked like a helpless and young-to-no-better wolf that had lost everything. "Good night, Mr. Grey Wolf," Wanchocho quietly said those words, then silently turned her back to the Grey Wolf that was already her husband in name. Closing her tired eyes, she continued to think about the future. They still had some food left, about 20 caddies of dried meat and 9 caddies of tuber powder. They had enough firewood for half a month. She was using up the animal skins very quickly. The one she had been wearing as clothes had been turned into a curtain to block the wind, and she was using the other large piece as a bed sheet. Of the 10 animal skins that the tribe had given her, one had gotten dirty and another piece had been torn apart to bandage Mr. Grey Wolf's injuries with the scraps set aside as makeshift towels. There were 8 pieces left. Of those 8 pieces, 3 were being used as blankets. Because Mr. Grey Wolf was so tall, he needed 2 pieces to cover up his upper body to his still intact right foot. She couldn't waste the last 5 pieces of animal skins. She planned on using them to make clothes. Chapter 34. It should be fine to share a bed. Right. 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If Mr. Food Reserve remained in his human form, he couldn't just remain with only his unmentionables covered up, right? Fortunately, when he had changed into his human form, a silvery gray animal pelt would appear wrapped around his waist. Saying it was an animal pelt wasn't quite correct. It was probably Mr. Grey Wolf's wolf pelt. What kind of mystical structure was it? Could that wolf pelt be taken off? Wanchocho's train of thought drifted into a strange area. Now that Mr. Grey Wolf was a married wolf, did he prefer his demon form or his human form more? She remembered that Mr. Grey Wolf could change the size of his demon form. As for his human form, could that wolf pelt be taken off? Wanchocho's consciousness gradually grew fuzzy. She had thought she would be too worried that a demon or fiend would rush in and kill them, but she was truly too exhausted. She didn't even pay attention to what she was thinking about on her way to drifting off to sleep. Her mind only had thoughts of Mr. Grey Wolf's beautiful gray-blue eyes and whether or not he could take off his wolf pelt in human form. Just like that, she slowly fell into deep slumber. It was pitch-black outside the cave. Giant masses of snowflakes fluttered down from the sky and gradually smudged away the blood stains at the entrance of the cave. After a while, only a blanket of white snow could be seen. The heavy snowfall was accompanied by a cold wind. The snow piled up on the trees that had already lost most of their leaves, and it only took a short time for the snow to paint the world in white. A middle-aged wolf demon that was less than 2 meters in length was stealthily approaching the cave on 4 paws. Slowly, he got closer to the cave that Wanchocho and Yuanju lived in. He halted when he was within 20 meters of Yuanju's cave. He had good night vision and could already see the faint light coming from the cave. The wolf demon carefully sniffed the surrounding area as if he was confirming something. A moment later, the middle-aged wolf demon seemed to have gotten the answer that he wanted. A faint green light flashed through his eyes. He slowly left the cave that Wan Qiuqiu and Yuan Ju lived in. Once he got to the edge of the forest, his pace changed to a swift run. Detouring around the Fire Wolf tribe's residential area, which was densely populated, he continued running until he arrived at a cave that was at the other end of the tribe's territory. This cave was near a cliff, but it was very safe. The wolf demon changed to his human form by the brightly lit cave. It was the middle-aged wolf demon that had led the group of wolf demons in bringing Wan Qiuqiu from the Wind Lion tribe to Yuan Ju's cave. Standing in front of a curtain that was made of thick animal skins, he called out in a reverent and respectful tone, "Shaman." A somewhat old voice came from behind the curtain. "Lin Sun. Come in." The middle-aged wolf demon named Lin Sun murmured an acknowledgement, lifted the thick animal skin, and stepped into the cave. Although it was very dark outside, there were special plants in the shaman's cave that gave off light. These blue plants had the same shape as morning glories. Lamp covers that were as thin as fish scales covered the plants. These plants adorned the edge of the tables and gave off a bright, blue light. The unique blue light brightly illuminated the entire cave. Underneath this strange lighting, the shaman's face, which was covered with painted markings, looked even more unearthly. The elderly shaman was holding a staff with a wolf head carved at the top. He was sitting next to a stone stove to keep himself warm when Lin Sun came in. The shaman's wrinkled hand trembled, and his voice tightened when he asked, "How did it go? Is that human dead?" Chapter 35. Why was she sleeping next to him? 1. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. When the middle-aged wolf demon, Lin Sun, heard the shaman's question, he shook his head with a solemn expression. "She's not dead." The shaman's elderly voice trembled. It was full of incredulity. "She's really still alive." Lin Sun hesitates before answering, "I didn't dare to get too close to Yuan, the former chief's cave. I just changed into demon form and carefully sniffed nearby his cave. I didn't smell any human blood. That human, Wan Qiuqiu, is probably still alive." Hearing these words, the shaman felt resentful that Lin Sun failed to meet expectations. He scolded, "Why are you so cowardly? I'll overlook that you guys were so scared of Yuan Ju in the past. But now, he's been crippled and blinded. He might already be dead, and you guys are still scared of approaching his cave. So exasperating." Lin Sun somewhat timidly said, "Even though he's crippled, he used to be a strong 5th-rank demon. If he loses his temper, I'm afraid, why are you so terrified? You're not even as brave as your mate. What kind of male demon are you?" Although the shaman was old, he still had plenty of energy to scold the Lin Sun. Lin Sun was scolded so badly that he couldn't raise his head. As a 3rd-rank demon, Lin Sun was an awe-inspiring figure amongst the other members of the tribe. He was in the top 3 strongest warriors in the tribe. Even though the shaman was scolding him like this, he had no thought of rebelling. First, since Yuan Ju was crippled and the Fire Wolf tribe hadn't chosen a new chief to replace him, the shaman currently had the highest prestige in the tribe. Second, the shaman was the strongest or 2nd strongest person in the tribe. He didn't dare to talk back to him. Never mind. The shaman stopped being angry in front of this scaredy-cat wolf demon. He touched his wolf-head walking stick and said in a low voice, "Although you haven't reached 4th rank yet or cultivated a demon consciousness, your sense of smell as a 3rd-rank demon shouldn't be wrong. Perhaps, that Wan Qiuqiu isn't dead yet." The shaman lightly sighed. "I'm not surprised that Yuan Ju didn't eat her, but it's surprising that he didn't kill her. That human might be a bit special. Once it's snowing less hard, have Guo. Go over there. If she really is still alive, let her meet the humans in the tribe and participate in the humans gathering team. That human can be considered pitiful. Let her have some good days before she dies," the shaman slowly said. Lin Sun couldn't resist asking, "Shaman, if Wan Qiuqiu dies, should we find another mate for the former chief?" Shaman shook his head to indicate no. If Wan Qiuqiu died, that person wouldn't have the patience to wait until the next human that was willing to marry Yuan Ju appeared. Lin Sun hesitated for a moment. Thinking of that weak-sounding threatening growl during the daytime, he asked, "Shaman, will this method really remove the former chief's curse on the tribe?" Yuan Ju hadn't always been this hated by the Fire Wolf tribe. In the past, the demons of the tribes disliked and feared Yuan Ju, who they thought was bloodthirsty and cruel. Bad luck would inexplicably befall anyone that got too close to him. But, in the end, he was a powerful wolf demon that hadn't even reached maturity yet. Even though his temper was very bad, under his leadership in the past years, the Fire Wolf tribe had been able to eat well and dress warmly. No one had starved to death. Usually, as long as the wolf demons weren't actively seeking death and kept their distance from Yuan Ju, then they wouldn't be in any danger. BNOL.M. And so, when the beast tide had ended and Yuan Ju, who was crippled, blinded, disfigured, fell at the edge of the forest, most of the wolf demons weren't upset about it. They abandoned him there without any medical treatment, but they didn't burn the food and animal skins in his cave while he was unconscious. What happened after was because of the shaman's divination. After the beast tide had receded, the shaman's rarely seen divination had been successful. He found out that the Fire Wolf tribe had faced the calamitous beast tide because of Yuan Ju. He wasn't an ordinary gray wolf demon, but a wolf that carried a curse. Chapter 36. Why was she sleeping next to him? 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The shaman couldn't divine Yuan Ju's ancestry, but it showed him that Yuan Ju's heart was a first-rate tonic for fiends. Thus, his heart was something that all fiends wanted. As long as he stayed in the tribe, it would greatly increase the possibility that fiends would attack the Fire Wolf tribe. And so, the shaman told the tribe that Yuan Ju was cursed. As a result of the shaman's words, Yuan Ju, who hadn't been liked by the members of the Fire Wolf tribe to begin with, had become hated by everyone. Originally, there had been some wolf demons that were grateful to Yuan Ju for blocking most of the attacks in the beast tide and saw him as the savior of the Fire Wolf tribe. But, after they found out the results of the divination, one after another, they regarded Yuan Ju with hostility. If it wasn't for Yuan Ju, their tribe wouldn't have suffered from the beast tide. And so, when the shaman had proposed following the ancient demon tradition of paying 300 caddies of salt for a human that would willingly marry Yuan Ju, the demons that had lost their loved ones in the beast tide exploded in anger. They wanted nothing more than to kill Yuan Ju with their bare hands. Moreover, 300 caddies of salt wasn't a small amount. Why should it be used for Yuan Ju? However, the shaman said that if the demons of the tribe killed Yuan Ju, then the curse would be transferred onto the tribe. If that happened, the entire tribe would be doomed. He told them that according to the divination, as long as they married a human to him, regardless if she died or not, she would bear the curse in place of the Fire Wolf tribe. It was only by doing this, that the Fire Wolf tribe would be spared. Moreover, although Yuan Ju's demon core had broken, if he chose to self-destruct, even if all the demons in the tribe opposed him, it wouldn't be enough to stop him, and that's if he had no curse. In addition, Yuan Ju had accumulated a lot of influence over the past several years. A lot of the food stored in the caves was from Yuan Ju leading them to hunting those prey. There were a lot of demons that wouldn't dare to or couldn't bear to strike the fatal blow on their former chief. And so, although everyone felt dissatisfied, there were no better options. They reluctantly agreed under pressure. It was only Lin Sun that remained puzzled why the curse would shift onto other people. The shaman's old face shook when he heard Li Sun mention the curse. His pupils also trembled too. He abruptly raised his voice and smacked his walking stick hard on the ground. Shut up. Why are you asking this? Do you have nothing better to do? Lin Sun was shocked by the shaman's yelling. Although the shaman scolded him in the past, the shaman had never gotten so angry before. He could clearly feel the oppressive pressure that belonged to a fourth-rank demon radiating from the shaman. Once he recovered from the shock, he immediately knelt down to apologize. "Shaman, I spoke out of turn." "Scram! Get out!" Shaman fiercely kicked him. "Yes." Lin Sun was angry about being scolded and yelled at, but he didn't dare to show it. He could only leave the shaman's cave with his tail tucked between his legs. After Lin Sun left, the shaman's old face abruptly changed. After a while, he finally slowly sighed. What he had said about the curse was mostly true. He had only made up a small part of it to fulfill that person's request. It was true that the Fire Wolf tribe had suffered a calamitous beast-tide attack because of Yuan Ju. It was also true that Yuan Ju's heart was a delicious snack for fiends. But, right now, it wasn't Taitnlsing enough to cause a beast-tide attack. It was because of that person. To use the words of that person, who had used the Fire Wolf tribe's well-being to threaten him into making up the curse, a wolf that goes mad from the pain of losing his loved one and falls into an abyss of hate and self-blame. A heart that unceasingly twitches and spasms from pain. Ah, that's the ultimate delicacy. Truly, I miss that wonderful taste. Chapter 37. Why was she sleeping next to him? 3. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The conversation that had taken place in the Fire Wolf tribe's shaman's cave was so short that it was like an insignificant interlude in the snowy night. The interlude didn't affect Lin Sun, who had been scolded and was walking back to his cave with an ashen face. It didn't obstruct the heavy snow that fell to ground without restraint. It had no effect on the inhabitants of a cave that was at the edge of the forest. Ruan Qiuqiu, who had an animal skin wrapped around her, was sweetly sleeping. By her side, Mr. Grey Wolf, who had fainted because of his injuries, was still unconscious. The snow fell for a long time. Ruan Qiuqiu, who had been tired for a long time and hadn't had a chance to rest until now, also slept for a long time. So much so that she slept even longer than Mr. Grey Wolf. When Mr. Grey Wolf regained consciousness, she was still asleep. She was sleeping sweetly too. Yuan Ju had thought since he had coldly told her, "Stay away from me," she would definitely be unhappy. She would probably leave him lying on the cold ground, beat him up to vent her anger, or go straight to turning him into wolf jerky. He had already prepared himself to wake up on the cold ground before falling unconscious. But his slender fingers gently brushed the soft animal skin underneath him. His upper body, which was naked after he had transformed into human form, didn't feel any dampness or pain. He only felt the warmth of being wrapped in an animal skin. Even his stomach, which had been in constant pain from not eating in a long time, felt better. She must have fed him. As Mr. Grey Wolf felt the changes in his condition, he couldn't resist slowly clenching the animal skin underneath him. Why did she do this? That human named Ruan Qiuqiu. Yes, that human named Ruan Qiuqiu, where was she now? Mr. Grey Wolf suppressed the strange emotions in his heart. He tried to stretch out his demon consciousness to observe Ruan Qiuqiu. But right now, he was so weak that he didn't have any demon energy available. He tried a few times, but he couldn't even see the spot where he was lying down, much less the rest of the cave to capture the image of Ruan Qiuqiu's figure. He exerted himself physically to open his eyes, but he only saw familiar darkness. His wounds and leg stump throbbed with pain. Mr. Grey Wolf pursed his pale lips. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Could a demon or fiend have kidnapped her and eaten her while he was unconscious? His heart abruptly leaped up in alarm. If he was in his demon form, his fur would be bristling. Mr. Grey Wolf's nails uncontrollably shifted into sharp claws, and he accidentally poked 10 inconspicuous holes in the animal skin. He didn't know why he cared so much about that human. He had clearly thought it through already, he wouldn't let her stay by his side for long. And yet, he really wanted to know, where was she right now? Was she alive? As he thought of how she had blushed because of him yesterday, it felt hard to breathe. He wanted to speak, but an iron taste came from his throat. Blood slowly dripped down from his lips, but he didn't even have the strength to raise his hand to wipe it away. He could only weakly cough. Really, he was just like a useless person. Ha! Muanchocho was awakened by the bout of light coughing. Right after waking up, she saw that the wolf demon lying next to her was painfully coughing out blood with his eyes open. Muanchocho. This image was so horrifying that it took several seconds before she could react. Her first reaction was, Mr. Food Reserve was so hard to raise. Fortunately, she hadn't removed the animal skin she had put underneath him last night to catch the food and water. Muanchocho blinked. Her whole body felt sore and painful. She almost couldn't move her legs and feet. After recovering from her shock of seeing Mr. Grey Wolf coughing blood, she didn't care about anything else and rolled over to his side. Very worried, she forced herself to raise her arm despite barely being able to sew and poke his hand, which was underneath an animal skin. She worriedly asked, "Husband, why are you coughing blood? Are you in a lot of pain? When did you wake up?" "Ah, the fire went out." "No wonder it's so cold." Shocked to hear a voice by his side, Yuan Ju stopped coughing for a moment. In the next moment, the combination of surprise, happiness, anger, and shyness made his coughing even worse. This human, why was she sleeping next to him? Chapter 38. They had already reached a relationship milestone of sleeping together on the same stone bed. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Cough. In the dark world, Mr. Grey Wolf suddenly heard her voice coming from less than half a meter away. He was dumbstruck. She hadn't listened to his threats, she wasn't afraid that he was cursed, she hadn't left him on the ground, she actually slept next to him. The metallic taste of blood gushed up from his throat and dull pangs came from his chest. Other than fretfulness, Yuan Ju couldn't put into words what he was feeling. He instinctively grasped the animal skin underneath him with more force. His claws went straight through the animal skin, causing the originally 10 small holes to widen into 10 big holes. His sharp claws touched the stone bed. The stone bed that he had specially acquired. At the time, he didn't know what emotion had pushed him into getting this bed. Mr. Grey Wolf returned to his senses. He seemed to suddenly realize how he looked. The tips of his ears, which were hidden under his black hair, immediately became stained with a touch of red. He instinctively shut his deep, beautiful, dull glassy, gray-blue eyes. His long eyelashes twitched lightly. He pressed his lips tightly together, unwilling to let more of the dirty blood fall out. He tightened certain muscles to suppress his coughing so that only muffled sounds could be heard. He had acted so miserable and absurdly wretched in front of her yesterday. Before, he could have said he was testing her reaction, but today. Mr. Grey Wolf lightly turned his head away. Restraining the feelings that he couldn't put into words, he shyly and annoyedly thought, never mind that she slept next to him last night, now she was poking his arm with her hand. Although there was animal skin between them, he could still feel the softness of her touch. She had anxiously said so many words by his ear. Did she not know that her body was covered with his scent now? She had no sense of shame. Mr. Grey Wolf didn't know why, but other than the pain, he also felt something else. For example, he didn't know why his face and ears felt hot. He wasn't in his demon form, so his body wasn't feeling hot from being covered in fur, but he felt really hot. It felt as if his silent and cold heart had been softly poked by that human named Muanchocho when she touched his arm. She had almost broken the thick layer of ice around his heart. Not wanting her to discover that he had made holes in their only large animal skin, Mr. Grey Wolf silently changed his wolf paw back into a wide hand with slender fingers. His slightly prominent gloomy eyebrows furrowed into an obvious character. Muanchocho didn't know that a few words from her had such a high destructive power on Mr. Grey Wolf. She worriedly looked at him. His eyes had originally been open while he lightly coughed. He had suddenly stilled for a moment before turning his head away from her. And now, he was stubbornly gritting his teeth and forcing himself to not cough. From her perspective, she could only see his cold, pale chin. Clots of blood followed the up and down movement of his Adam's apple. Blood dripped down from the corners of his mouth and eventually meandered its way into his long hair. Muanchocho was scared by the amount of blood coming out from him. She struggled into a sitting position. Worried that he had lost consciousness from the excessive pain, she gently pushed his arm and called out, "Husband." However, Muanchocho didn't get any vocal response. She only saw him tensing his masseter muscle. He involuntarily let out a muffled cough. When that happened, his hair moved and the tip of his red ear was revealed. His eyes were red-rimmed too. Muanchocho's hand, which she was going to use to nudge him again, froze in the air. She looked at the struggling Mr. Grey Wolf and made a guess. He didn't want her to see him in such a sorry state. Chapter 39. They had already reached a relationship milestone of sleeping together on the same stone bed. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After all, he had once been an aggressive and prideful alpha wolf. Muanchocho could understand why he was in this mood, so she didn't insist on making Mr. Food Reserve admit that he had woken up. Although she felt sympathy for his pride, she wasn't completely over him telling her to stay away yesterday. Muanchocho's eyebrows slightly moved. She curved her lips into a smile. Enduring the soreness and pain in her legs and feet, she sat up and worriedly asked, "Husband, did you faint again because of your serious injuries?" She saw that the tip of Mr. Grey Wolf's ear had turned reddish, but he didn't refute her words. Muanchocho felt bad for him and also found his behavior laughable. She draped her wedding outfit over herself as an outer layer, then she carefully crawled off the bed. She did her best to avoid touching Mr. Grey Wolf on her way off the bed. That wolf had too many injuries. If she accidentally touched him anywhere, it would probably cause him pain. As she wrapped animal skins around her feet, Muanchocho saw that Mr. Grey Wolf was trembling from her peripheral vision. Cold wind was blowing through the cracks of the tattered animal skin curtain. She shivered too. "It's very cold, right? I'll go start a fire." After she finished putting on the makeshift shoes, she stumbled over to the stone stove, picked up the flint, and worked on starting a fire. This type of firewood was truly special. Although it had been completely burned, there weren't much ashes left in the stone stove. It was very easy to light it on fire too. After the fire was set up, Muanchocho felt that the somewhat damp cave was warming up. Enduring the pain from her injured feet, she slowly walked back to the stone bed to observe Mr. Grey Wolf's condition. He seemed a bit better. Although he was pretending to be unconscious, he was no longer coughing blood. However, the animal skin she had placed under his neck was frightfully stained and sections of his long hair was matted together from the blood. The handsome wolf's face, which already looked sinister from the scar, looked even more horrifying with blood drying on his face. "Thank God, you're not coughing blood anymore." Taking advantage that the wolf was pretending to be unconscious, Muanchocho lifted up the blood-stained hair, revealing Mr. Grey Wolf's entire face. She looked at his deathly pale face and his unnaturally shaking eyelashes. While stretching out her finger, she mobilized her water ability and explained, "Fortunately, my mutated water ability has a weak healing effect." As Muanchocho said this, a drop of water slowly condensed at her fingertip. Worried that the droplet would fall off, she blurted out, "Mr. Food Reserve," instead of "husband." Muanchocho. Since she had already said those words, she put on a bold face and ignored that Mr. Grey Wolf's brows had furrowed even more. Gently pinching his chin, she fed the droplet that contained healing effects. After doing this, Muanchocho immediately took 2 steps back. She hoped that while the wolf wasn't paying attention, she could change back how she addressed him. "Husband, you have to get better soon. After saying those words at the speed of light, she picked up the animal skin on the stone table as well as on the wooden basin she had used last night from the floor. She turned around and left the bedroom by wiggling through the gap between the animal skin she had pressed to the wall with a stone bench and the cave wall. Shortly after she left, Mr. Grey Wolf slowly opened his eyes. Although what he saw was the same whether he opened his eyes or not, he still instinctively did so. His blue-gray eyes chased after the figure of Wanchocho, who had just left the bedroom. The droplet that she had fed him had a slight chill. That feeling spread from his lips to his mouth and throat. She had said the droplet only had a weak healing effect, but almost instantly, that droplet gave him relief from the severe pain he felt. The droplet also had strong spiritual energy. Chapter 40. They had already reached a relationship milestone of sleeping together on the same stone bed. 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Her footsteps gradually grew faint. And yet, Yuan Ju's face warmed up. He raised his hand and tried to push down that strange heat. Ashamed and annoyed, he thought, once again, that human revealed that she thought of him as a backup food source. In that human's eyes, did his existence only serve as a food reserve and wolf jerky? Yuan Ju inexplicably felt resentment at having been unfairly treated. Clearly, they had already reached a relationship milestone of sleeping together on the same stone bed. As Wanchocho stepped foot out of the bedroom, she regretted it. The bedroom and the rest of the cave was only separated by animal skin. So why was it so much colder outside? She rubbed her face that felt as if it had instantly turned into ice. Turning around the corner, she saw that it was still snowing outside. She was lucky that Mr. Grey Wolf had chosen a cave with a good location. It was on a small slope. The topography was relatively high. Otherwise, with how long it had been snowing, the entrance to the cave would have been blocked by the snow. Wanchocho went out and got some snow. She didn't go back to the bedroom. Instead, she went to the storage room. She had built a small stone stove there yesterday. She pulled out another small stone pot from the corner, made a fire using the special firewood, and waited for the snow to turn into water. She didn't want to waste resources, but she would find it too embarrassing to wash up in front of Mr. Grey Wolf. Wanchocho had to go outside several times to fetch more snow, but she finally felt clean all over. Carrying a basin of warm water, she returned to the bedroom. Mr. Grey Wolf might be addicted to pretending. She could see that his hand was moving, but he continued to stubbornly pretend to be unconscious. Wanchocho easily cleaned up Mr. Grey Wolf, who was semi-cooperative. Then, she boiled more water to cook something. She wanted to eat something with salt, but boiling the salt so that it could be used would take a long time and it would be troublesome too. She looked at a block of salt. It was too hard for her to break up that block and she didn't want to cook the entire block of salt. She glanced again at Mr. Grey Wolf, who was lying on the bed. Wanchocho took out a block of salt and placed it on the table. Speaking as if she was having a hard time, she probingly and expectantly said, "It's so hard to break this block of salt. I guess we won't be able to add salt to our food today. If only Mr. Tianluo. If only Tianluo the Grey Wolf would help me." After Wanchocho finished speaking, she glanced at Mr. Grey Wolf, who seemed as if he hadn't heard anything. She felt that Tianluo the Grey Wolf might need some space to act, so she picked up the dirty animal skins and the 2 wooden basins and left the bedroom. There was no sign that the snowfall was going to get smaller. Thick clouds had accumulated in the sky, which looked very oppressive. Wanchocho recalled the amount of firewood she had used last night and guessed that it was around 2 to 3 p.m. She hadn't thought she would sleep for so long, but fortunately, her physical state had recovered a lot. Although she felt sore, she was in a much better condition than yesterday when she couldn't get up from the snow. Wanchocho scooped up snow with a wooden basin and went back to the storage room. While Mr. Grey Wolf was working, she would wash the animal skins that had gotten dirty yesterday. She didn't know how many days the blizzard would last. At the speed that Mr. Grey Wolf was using the animal skins, if she didn't start washing them earlier rather than later, they might soon fall into the awkward situation of not having any clean animal skins available.